Let's talk about something we hear all the time on TV news programs. Could this scandal be the next Watergate? It happens a lot, especially with the big stories that dominate coverage on our competitors. On Fox, the right-leaning network of choice, there seems to be an obsession with Benghazi. We were trying to count the number of times they compare it to Watergate. I ran out of time. Let's just say they do it a lot. On the left, on MSNBC, it's Chris Christie, all the time. Listen to HBO's Bill Maher give Rachel Maddow a hard time about that.
I said I had been in love with MSNBC, which I am still actually in love with MSNBC. And, but I tongue-in-cheek said, you know, I'm going to have to break up with you because you've become obsessed with another man, Chris Christie.
Here's the thing. I am totally obsessed with the Christie story, unapologetically, and will continue to be obsessed with it while amazing things in that story continue to happen.
This is an actual scandal. It's just that it's not Watergate. He's not the president. He's not even a guy who ever himself said he was going to be running for president.
You heard that word, Watergate? So is the Chris Christie story as big as Rachel Maddow seems to think it is? Well, I brought in the best possible person to ask, one half of the team that broke Watergate wide open, Carl Bernstein of Woodward & Bernstein, now CNN commentator. Carl, welcome.
Good to be here.
I was curious about whether you agree more with Bill Maher on that one or with Rachel Maddow.
I'm probably in the middle for a number of reasons, not least of which is that we're dealing here with ideologically driven cable networks. And that is not about repertorial decisions. And it's about a lack of context. The Christie story is a great and important story. Should it be the lead every night on a real news broadcast? Of course not. Is Rachel Maddow's broadcast a news broadcast? No, it's a commentary broadcast by and large, and a point of view. I think that we've got much too much ratings driven by story rather than by actual content of a whole report over the course of a week or a month or a year, but rather we're moving in cable news toward what story will drive the ratings on a given day, and that exaggerates and makes it impossible to have context.
Of course, cable news was not invented during the actual Watergate era. Do you think if there had been cable news that it would have lessened the stories in people's minds? Would it have heightened people's interest?
I'm going to cut you off. I think if history almost never works, so I'm not going to go there.
Well, I'm sure when you hear, for example, in that case, Bill Maher, Rachel Maddow use the word Watergate, you probably stiffen your back a little bit.
As you know, I said on this broadcast before, I think calling what happened in New Jersey Bridgegate is unfair to the governor of New Jersey. At the same time, I think he's in a hell of a mess, that he has not been as open and forthcoming as he has claimed to be, that there's ongoing investigations, and at the same time, he could open up his files, the same things that his lawyers are deciding to turn over to the investigations. He could open it up to the press. And also, Bill Maher's point about this is just about a little bridge closing is wrong, because this is about the governor of a state who was the front runner for the presidential nomination, just as Hillary Clinton is the presumed front runner for the presidential nomination and should be scrutinized. And what's happened here is that the allegations here are about the governor of a state and those closest to him putting people's lives in danger. People who had ambulances, people's livelihoods, this kind of use for vengeance of a governor's office is a big story and ought to be. It is not some kind of minor prank.
We did hear him criticize the media again this week. Let's play the tape of Governor Christie speaking about that.
You folks are the only people at the moment who are asking me about this. I've been to 2 town hall meetings in the last 2 weeks with 28 questions, and there hasn't been one on this, not one. I will be damned if I let any of this stuff get in the way of doing my real job.
So, Carl, the governor there is implying the public doesn't care about this case, only the press does.
Either the governor is being totally disingenuous, or worse, he's totally out of touch with his constituents. I was in Montclair, New Jersey the other night, and that's all people there wanted to talk about was what's happening with Chris Christie and the bridge. Look, trying to make the conduct of the press the issue is an old tactic. It's not going to work here. The problem is the conduct of the people around the governor and perhaps the governor himself.
We're continuing to
and
see more of
we'll
these.
find out what the answers are going to be.
We're seeing more of these dribs and drabs in this story. Not huge developments, but lots of dribs and drabs. Like this week, we saw new text messages from the governor's aides, making jokes about causing traffic problems outside a rabbi's house. And then they joke about all flights to Tel Aviv being mysteriously delayed. It's just a joke, but it does speak to a pattern of behavior, doesn't it?
Well, first of all, I don't think it is a joke. I think there is no question about the awful aura of Governor Christie's office and the way his aides operated. That's a matter of fact. It's not a matter of opinion at this point. They're despicable in the way that they acted.
Despicable,
and the way that
that's a strong word.
Well, they are. In the way they acted and in the way that they talk and have talked. There's no question about that. The question is, well, what does that have to do with Governor Christie? Why did he allow people like this to work for him, and were they authorized to do the things they did, and when did he learn about what was done? Those are the questions. He hasn't produced satisfactory answers yet, but at the same time, he deserves fairness in the media, and he deserves fairness in the prosecutorial inquiry, and we'll see where this story goes. We don't know the answers yet. It does not make people in the media happy to say we do not know the answers yet. We ought to be saying that a lot more in our coverage of all kinds of things.
One of the most honest things we can say is that we don't
exactly
know.
I mean, come on. We don't have crystal balls, and we also don't do enough reporting. So this is a story. There has been good reporting on this story by the local newspapers, weeklies as well as dailies in northern New Jersey. And that actually is what Rachel Maddow has been basing a lot of her commentary on these stories produced by local media.
One thing you can tell us, a few others can't, is what are the signs that a scandal is something that a politician can't recover from? And what signs do you look for with something like this?
I'm not very good on how the citizenry responds to, quote, scandals. What happened in Watergate is that as evidence became more and more undeniable that Richard Nixon had really presided over a criminal presidency, and that it not only was about Watergate, but it was about a basic unconstitutional means of behavior, vengeance at his enemies, ordering break-ins, fire bombings, saying terrible things on his tape recordings. As it became apparent, especially to Republicans, that his conduct was indefensible, then things started to move and change, and citizens along with it. And to what extent I can tell how things work, that's part of the process. We've got a new equation, though, in our politics today that's very disturbing. And that is that more and more people are not open in this country to the best obtainable version of the truth, which really is what reporting is about, what good journalism is about. And instead,
do you mean they close themselves off?
Let me finish. Instead, they're looking to cable news, they're looking to the web to find information that that girds and that supports their already preconceived notions and ideologies and prejudices. That's different than at the time of Watergate. Many more people, I believe, were open to the best obtainable version of the truth then. And we now have a kind of two-way process in which we have these media outlets online, in cable news, feeding these prejudices, feeding these ideologies without interest in truth. And we don't know the extent to which the citizens are responsible, the media is responsible, and the political system is responsible, but they're all irresponsible in this unwillingness to make truth. And truth is hard to determine, but to make the best obtainable version of the truth the object of what they're doing.
Carl, thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here.